1.
Good evening, folks. I want to thank everyone who's here for coming out tonight. I'm High Point Mayor Jay Wagner. I'm calling to order the High Point City Council's regular meeting for November 21st. And let everybody know that all members of council are present except for Councilman Victor Jones, who feel a little under the weather, so he will not be with us tonight. I want to thank you all for coming out, and for those listening online for taking part in the meeting tonight. And we'll begin following a moment of silence, and then I'll ask everyone to please rise for a moment of silence, and then the pledge of allegiance to the flag. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we'll get right into our regular agenda items. The first section of the agenda is the Finance Committee. And I will turn the meeting over to Britt Moore, who will handle that portion of the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to have to do this item by item tonight, so we'll start off with item 2022-574, considering NLC third-party contract.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. The city hires a third-party administrator to administer property and liability claims for us. The city had a long-time TPA of more than 20 years who, in the December of 2021, informed us they could no longer perform that service. Staff reached out to several TPAs for essentially quotes for a year in order to make sure we had that service. And the North Carolina League of Municipalities had the best response. We have since implemented their system. We've been using them for nearly a year now. They started actually in February, I believe. And staff is happy, finance staff is happy, legal staff is satisfied as well. And we would like to take a 3-year agreement for their services, after which we will conduct another RFP to look at the market and see what else is out there. I'll tell you that we had a recent RFP from the Insurance Advisory. So we had 4 submittals to just look at, to compare pricing to, and this was very fair. The league's pricing was very fair. And again, we've been satisfied with their service, and we're asking for a 3-year agreement with an estimated total contract price of $240,000, or approximately $80,000 per year.
Any question, comment?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion second. I have one comment before you vote, Mayor. Page 6 of the agreement.
Okay.
I just find this interesting. And I read it, I'm still not sure what it means. What is the Iran Divestment Act certification?
So that is actually, it's a comment, it's even in our contracts, and I'm sure our attorney could describe it a little better.
Yes, it's an attorney thing that is required. This one came down from the feds.
Okay. Well, you can explain more to me later.
Well, I thought you would like a succinct answer from an attorney, because
So divestment means there's no investment, right? No, it's a very common clause in even our own contract, but it is required by, I knew the state.
With people who do business in Iran.
Thank you, that's what I was going for, yeah.
that's right. We can't do business with bad people.
That's right.
So what's the name of the TPA?
It's the North Carolina League of Municipalities. They have a risk management service, and so you may remember we are currently with them for workers' compensation claims.
Okay.
We're on a 3-year agreement with them for that service, and then we have currently been utilizing them for TPA services on general and property liability claims.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for approval of this item. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the contract, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Is anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. Next item, 2022-548, is a contract agreement dealing with the High Point Fire Department, and Chief Tommy Reed.
Good
Good evening. So what we have before you is a contract that was awarded to Laheen, basically, which was the lowest responsible bidder. Summit Engineering came in and done a study and checked the floors and the structure itself, and so they feel like that we can repair what's there. This building was built in 1963 or so, and so it's had a lot of trucks running across the bay, but we received 2 bids, and Laheen, we're requesting that the bid be awarded to Laheen Construction.
Is this is a redo of the whole floor, not just a patching of the,
Right, this is redo the whole bay floor, all 4 bays.
okay. Any comments or questions? Then I'll make a motion to approve item 2022-548.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second for approval of this item. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Chief. Next item is 2022-549. This is an acknowledgement of receipt of our comprehensive financial report, and Mr. Fitzjohn's back with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. The fiscal year 2022 audit was completed on time in October 31st, as required by statutes. I do want to just take the time to acknowledge some members of the finance team that made that possible. Heather Forrest, our Assistant Finance Director, and Jamie Jones, our Accounting Manager. So they have been part of the team now for 4 years that have delivered that on time. And again, it's statutorily required, but I promise it's not as easy as it sounds to get that done. We are joined by Mr. Daniel Gaggerty, I knew it, our auditor from Cherry Beckert, who will present to you about the audit, and then at the end we will ask you to acknowledge the presentation and receipt. And I believe you all have copies in your mailboxes if you have not looked into them.
Thank you, Bobby, and good evening, everyone. As Bobby mentioned, I'm happy to be able to be here tonight with you in person to be able to discuss the audit results for this past audit. Getting right into it, we just like to always just kind of remind and acknowledge our team members as well. In terms of the audit, myself is the engagement director on this engagement, Lauren Strope is the second reviewer, and then we had Jen Moran, who was the manager, and Krista Long and Brianne Lucky as the senior and associate on the engagement, with Brianne having worked on this engagement in previous years and Jen and Krista being new to the team this year. Skipping right past the agenda here, we're going to go over just first of all, just the results of our audit. We always like to just remind you of our role as the external auditors. We perform our audits under accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. We also perform our audits in accordance with government auditing standards, all in which to form an opinion on the financial statements that they are fairly presented, in reasonable assurance they're fairly presented without material misstatement. We issued an unmodified, clean opinion on the financial statements, which is the highest level opinion we can give under our auditing standards. We also audit the city's compliance with federal and state grants. We tested 4 grants this year, one of them being the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, and then also a couple year state grants, the Thrive Chamber of Commerce grant and the market, yeah. Yes. So with that audit, we have issued our report dated as well, October 31st. We noted no issues with compliance. We don't issue an opinion when we issue our single audit reports. It's a report that we would issue any findings if we were to come across any findings in which we had none. I'll just kind of brief you on the whole presentation itself is a little bit more wordy than it has been in the past, you might notice. In the past, we had issued a separate letter. It was a SAS 114 letter. Instead of issuing a separate letter, we've decided to just formulate that letter within a presentation format. I don't plan to read word for word from every bunch of the slides, but it's all the information we are required to communicate to you all. This slide in summary just tells you our responsibilities to provide any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses we may find as part of our audit and communicate it to you all. This is the definition of what a material weakness and significant deficiency is, with a material weakness being one where it's a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement may go undetected, whereas a significant deficiency is really just defined as lesser than a material weakness, but still important enough that we provide information to you all if we were to find any. And we noted no material weaknesses in our audit. From a corrected and uncorrected misstatement, we are to provide you with information if we had any audit adjustments. I'm happy to say from a corrected misstatement standpoint, we had none. All of the information that you see in the annual comprehensive financial report that you've reviewed is what was provided to us by management at the beginning of our audit, so nothing was changed as a result of our audit procedures. From an uncorrected misstatement standpoint, we had one item that we went over with management related to your landfill, and that just related to you accruing for the whole liability versus what would be your capacity at that landfill. Your landfill is almost at full capacity, so it wasn't that big of a difference, but it was big enough that we do need to address that and communicate that to all of you. But management determined it was not significant to the financial statements, and we agree with management's assessment. From a standpoint of significant accounting policies, Note 1 includes all your significant accounting policies. The only change this year to any accounting policies was the implementation of GASB 87, which is the new lease standard. This standard required you, when you're in a situation of being a lessee, to record a right to use asset and a lease liability on your books. And then in terms of a lessor situation, when you are leasing out a property, you would record a receivable and what would be deferred as a deferred inflow, but you could think of that as just really a liability that you would unearned revenue recognize over the life of the lease. We noted no issues with the implementation of the standard. We tested a certain number of leases as part of our testing. We also looked over how management made sure that their population was complete and everything was recorded, and we had no issues with that implementation. From a related party standpoint, we are to note to you if we find any related parties that were not already previously disclosed to us by management. We had none to report. If they find anything that we consider to be significant and unusual, and that's defined here as outside the normal course of business and unusual due to the nature or timing or size of the transaction, we noted none of these that need to be reported as a significant unusual item. From an estimate standpoint, there are a number of estimates the management uses to develop the financial statements. They're listed here as your unbilled revenue, allowance for doubtful accounts, depreciation, your leases, fair value investments, and then your defined benefit plans and other post-employment benefit plan liabilities, and then the solid waste landfill obligation. In all cases, we looked over the key assumptions used by management to develop these estimates, and we've noted no issues or inconsistencies with how they were utilized in the past. Financial statements are clear, neutral, and consistent. No significant disclosures to disclose. Non-attest services, this is where non-attest service is defined as anything outside of the audit, audit being an attest service. I'm happy to note that, in a lot of cases, we sometimes are drafting financial statements, or municipalities have their auditors draft the financial statements, but the city of High Point has been, for a while now, been drafting their own financial statements and continue to do so. So we're able to keep that balance where we are just auditing the statements and not preparing and auditing at the same time. You have to submit a data collection form at the end of our audit. This is a form that identifies all the federal dollars that we've audited and any findings we had with the federal government. We're required to fill that form out, but management has the expertise and ability to review that form and certify the information is correct. And from an independent standpoint, that being the foundation and pillar of our audit profession, we do confirm we are independent of the city. We have a list of items here. No difficulties were encountered during our audit, no disagreements with management. There were no auditor consultations. This would be if internally we consulted with someone outside of our engagement team. We received the manager representation letter dated October 31st, which is the date of the financial statements and when they were issued. Management had no consultations, shopping for an opinion outside of talking with us. There were no other findings or issues to report. There were no fraud or illegal acts that we noted as part of our audit, and there was no going concern. I just note here, too, is that going concern normally is something we don't even bring up unless there's a doubt that maybe you can continue as a going concern. The new audit report requires that we disclose and we say in our letter to you all that no going concern was evaluated. That's just a new part of our auditing standards. There was no going concern to be evaluated. Also, if you look at the audit opinion, it does look a little bit different, mostly geography. The opinion is now at the very top of the report. As opposed in the past, it usually was near the end of the report. And there's a little bit more, it's about 3 pages, whether it was 2 pages in the prior year, just a little bit more information as well that we're required to include in there. We have required supplementary information, which includes your management discussion analysis and your pension schedules that follow the notes. We do not provide or express an opinion on those statements, but we do want to make you alert of that. For the supplementary information, we do provide an in relation to opinion under our auditing standards, which means we're looking at the information and making sure it ties to the information included in your audit report. There's no inconsistencies. And then other information is your introductory section and your statistical section, which again, we do not render opinion on that, but we do read the information. From an upcoming financial standards, these are the 4 GASBs that are up and coming. The first, the 94 and 96, of which will be next year, which we don't think this will have a substantial effect on your financial statements, but we will work with management as they implement the standards. And then 100 and 101, which will come in the coming years. As part of our audit, if you remember from last year, the Local Government Commission had identified certain performance key indicators that they wanted us to evaluate at the end of our audit and prepare and present to you all as we conclude our audit. And so one of them was the fund balance available. And one thing I do want to just make sure it's clear here is that what the Local Government Commission identifies as available fund balance is all fund balance. So they're considering restricted and committed amounts in this number and in this percentage, where I know most people and most governments view that as unassigned and assigned balances that are as really available to be spent. So this number might be a little bit larger than you're used to seeing, but that's why it includes those balances. And it also includes your debt service fund balance as well. And so you can see here, it has been increasing here. The threshold that the Local Government Commission wants you to be at is at 25%. There's been talks about it's really 25% for almost all units over $100 million in expenditures. So it's kind of a one standard for most governments throughout North Carolina. The quick ratio for water sewer, this is your current assets to current liabilities. So at a given snapshot of time, what do you have in current assets to pay your current liabilities, in which you have 3.5 times the amount currently in this current year, and looking good in terms of that. And also one thing a lot of people always ask me is, compared to other governments, how are we? This is very in line with what we see at other governments as well. Having 3 or 4 times the amount in the quick ratio, where you're only required to have a 1 or greater. We also do this for your electric fund, which is a 5.87 and above the threshold as well, by quite a bit. Another performance indicator is that you have a greater threshold in terms of your operating net income after consideration, excluding depreciation, but including your debt and debt service principal payments. They have a very low threshold of 0. Anything above 0 would be fine for them. But for you, you have 9.8 million, so you easily meet that threshold. And then from a standpoint of what you have in unrestricted cash to your total expenses, it's about 72%. Where they're saying about 2 months is good enough. But again, this is something we get questions on often, is the fact that with your water sewer, you always have to be ready for future improvements. And so that's why you have more in that there, and again, very consistent with what we're seeing at other municipalities that have water and sewer funds. And for electric, you're about 7.1 and 52%. And then just kind of summarize a couple other things that they have us check is that you submitted your audit within 5 months of fiscal year end, which you submitted it within 4 months of fiscal year end. Your change in fund balance for the general fund was positive. Your budgeted tax levy was, your actual taxes collected were greater than your budgeted tax levy. It wasn't less than, greater than 3%. You have effective pre-audit process as it relates to your expenditures, and no late debt service payments or debt covenant compliance, and no statutory violations by general statute or any budgetary violations to note in our audit. So with that, I will open up for questions, but I do want to also just recognize as well Bobby and Jamie and Heather for all their hard work in getting this done. It's a team effort to get through it all. We start all the way back in April, May, and finish at the end of October, and they really work hard to get done, especially by that October 31st deadline.
Any questions? I'll just second everything you said about your team and our team. We appreciate the work. So with that, I can just, Council, I can just let the record show that we have received our High Point Annual Comprehensive Financial Report.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 2022-550. This is a contract amendment, and Heidi's going to present.
Yes, thank you, Councilman Moore, Mayor and Council. This is an amendment to the existing 2022 ortho imagery contract with Spatial Data. It increased the total cost to $90,700, which brings us here to you today. It is to obtain LiDAR imagery for a cost of $16,500, which is roughly 30% of the normal price of these services. But because we were already under contract with Spatial Data, they were able to make this offer, which will allow us to make new topographic data sets. And it is estimated to be delivered in February of '23.
Any comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve item 2022-550.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of this item. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
Next item, 2022-551. We're considering a contract on a comprehensive plan.
Again, thank you. This is to approve the selection of CZB LLC to create the comprehensive plan for the city of High Point. The comprehensive plan will establish High Point's growth vision and long-range policies to guide our future growth and development for approximately 20 years. We received 4 proposals. They were reviewed by a staff team. CZB was rated the highest based on the RFQ and the interview, and it will be about a 15-month process that will start in January of '23 for a cost of $350,000.
Comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve item 2022-551.
Second. Motion and a second for approval of this item. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
That's all for finance, Mayor.
Thank you, thank you. Next on the agenda are Community Development Committee items, and I will recognize Councilmember Williams, who chairs that committee.
All right, thank you, Mayor. First, before I begin, I'd like to pull a couple of items out of the consent agenda for tonight. That would be item 2022-535 and item 2022-536. Make the motion to pull those put those into pending per staff recommendation.
Okay, there's a proposal, there's a motion and a second to remove items 535 and 536 and place them in pending. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. And For the rest, which includes items 2022-533, 537, and 538, those items were presented to the Community Development Committee on November 8th and moved to council with a positive recommendation. I make the motion to approve those items.
There's a motion and a second for approval of items 533, 537, and 538. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. All right, next are our planning and development items. We have 2 items on for public hearing. The first one is going to be Clayton Properties Group, Inc., zoning map amendment 22-22. Several people signed up to speak at the public hearing. I will call these folks, once we have the staff presentation and the presentation from the applicant, I will call on the folks here and call on you in order. If you didn't get a chance to sign this and you'd like to speak as part of the public hearing, you will still have a chance. All right, I'll recognize our staff member, Herb Shannon, for staff's presentation. I'll open the public hearing.
Yes. Herb Shannon, Senior Planner for the Planning and Development Department. I'll be providing with the staff comments regarding this item, zoning map amendment case 22-22. This is a request to rezone a 33-acre tract of land to update previously adopted zoning conditions for this property. This site is located along the east side of Dilworth Road, approximately 750 feet north of Brickford Road. And let's see. Just to orient everyone, this, get a highlighter up here. The area highlighted in green is the site in question. You have Skeet Club Road to the south, Johnson Street to the east, and Dilworth Road to the west. This site has a low-density residential land use designation on the city's land use plan. That classification allows residential development at densities up to 5 units per acre. Regarding this site, it was initially, half of it was annexed in 2006. That area is highlighted in blue. In 2006, another developer submitted for annexation and zoning approval. That was to establish the Meadow Valley subdivision, and that created the initial conditional zoning R5 zoning for this property. In 2008, the northern portion of this site was annexed as an extension of the Meadow Valley subdivision. That updated the previous zoning for this part of the sight line west of the stream. The 2008 zoning approval allowed a mixed residential development consisting of a twin home tract and a single family tract. The proposed amendment will keep the same zoning districts. Instead of being conditional use, it'll be conditional zoning, where you're going to have this area here is going to remain as R5. It'll be a conditional zoning R5 district, and the rest of the area that's proposed for rezoning will be, instead of conditional use R5, will be conditional zoning R5. That is a blow-up of the site in question. When initially approved, there were some primary items that were set in that previous zoning that's still going to carry forward today. The area that's zone R5 was initially approved for a twin home development of up to 62 units. That will not change. There were also conditions from 2008 that townhomes and multifamily uses would be prohibited. That also will not change. In regards to the area that is zone R5, that will remain for a single family development with this updated zoning. There was also a key issue with the initial development of the Meadow Valley subdivision, that there be a public street network that will extend from Skeet Club Road all the way to Dilworth. Also, that will not change. That is an approximate location, that northwestern portion of the site, where Chasewater Trail is to be extended and connect up to Dilworth to provide multiple points of ingress and egress for the residents. The initial zoning approval provided for 3 street stubs, one to the west, one to the north, and one to the northeast. Earlier this year, the applicant submitted for subdivision approval based upon that 2008 zoning approval. They were going through that process, getting ready for final approval, when their environmental study noted a classified stream at this street stub outlined in red. so as to not have to do another stream crossing and to eliminate the environmental impact, the applicant has submitted this proposal to update the 2008 zoning approval. Primary changes consist of removing this street stub at this location. The street stub to the north, the street stub to the west will remain in place, along with that proposed public street connection up to Dilworth Road that will connect to Chasewater Trail. The area of the RM5 tract, there's a slight adjustment. It would be more of an arc-type configuration along this boundary here. It's about a half-acre increase, but the number of units proposed for that tract, 62 twin home units, that is remaining the same. To further clarify the circulation network, the applicant has submitted a conditional zoning plan that outlines their circulation network. Density will be similar. The only change in density, instead of there being 51 single-family lots, there will be 57 single-family lots. All of the other relevant conditions from that 2008 zoning approval are remaining the same. You have this as part of your packet. The applicant has submitted this as their conditional zoning plan. The primary purpose is to note their vehicle circulation network. So they're extending this street across the stream, showing the stub here, and also that circulation network that provides access to Dilworth Road. This is where that one street stub that was going to extend to this area, but due to stream, it's just a cul-de-sac. Those are the primary changes from the prior zoning approval. Key items to note in analysis: prior finding used to approve this zoning application have not changed. The requested amendment will still allow for a mixed residential subdivision that will be compatible with the surrounding area. Vehicle access conditions have been clarified with this conditional zoning plan, and the request maintains the circulation pattern to provide for alternate means of access through the site from Skeet Club Road all the way to Dilworth Avenue. Thus, staff is recommending approval of this amendment to the prior zoning approval and to establish this area as a conditional zoning RM5 and a conditional zoning R5 district. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this proposal at their October public hearing. The commission recommended approval by a vote of 8-0. And they forward to you two consistency statements. The Planning and Zoning Commission found that the request is consistent with the adopted policy guidance because the requested zoning amendments do not conflict with adopted policy guidance documents. The development of the site will continue to be in accordance with the low-density residential land use classification. And just to note, they're looking at a density of approximately 3.6 units per acre. The land use plan supports densities up to 5 units per acre. The commission also stated that the request is reasonable and in the public interest because the requested CZRM5 and CZR5 district are reasonable in that the conditional environmental impacts will be limited and the initially planned vehicle circulation pattern, street extension goals will be met. That's a brief summary of this zoning map amendment application. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
So to put this in a nutshell, we're going from 50 to 57 single-family lots, and we're cutting off one stub.
Yes,
Anything else I'm missing?
that's it.
Okay. All right. Any questions for staff? Okay. All right, thank you. So council will now hear from the applicant or applicant's representative. Mr. Ewing.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Jason Ewing, 2738 Mossy Meadow Drive, High Point. I am the land acquisition manager for Shugart Homes, which is a subsidiary of Clayton Properties Group. I have with me Will Derrickson, our land development manager, and our project engineer, Joe Buck in the back. And we're just here if you all have any questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for the applicant?
I do.
You got one.
There was something about the there was a bridge involved in this at one time, right? Does that have something to do with a stream, and then part of this triggered the rezoning?
Yeah, as Herb said, the one stub street that was to go into the eastern border, our most recent environmental showed a stream there that would require a stream crossing and additional environmental impact, and that's sort of what created this desire to go through the rezoning to tie into the new conditions of the UDO that was passed a few years back that would not require us to make that stream crossing for no reason.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Derrickson, you're on the list. Do you want to be heard? I'm good. Thank you. All right. Okay, next person on the list is James T. Hodgen. Just come up and give us your, when you come to the podium, give us your name and address just for our record, even though we've got it written down.
Do you have the ability to pull up? I'm not IT, I'm not your IT guy. I don't know how I
I
can
don't
move
know,
it.
maybe Herb can help.
Hey, Herb, can you, how do I move this back to the site map? That's it, right there. That's perfect. Okay. Thank you for your
Yeah,
time.
just give us your name and address for the record.
James Thomas Hodgen, live at 460 Dilworth Road. Post office assigned it as Kernersville, North Carolina, and that's what most people are in that area. I'm speaking on behalf of my father, James Gilbert Hodgen, who's at 1590 Squire Davis Road in Kernersville, North Carolina. I want to thank the city council and the mayor and also Herb Shannon and his office, and for speaking with us and communicating with us about this particular issue. Big reason why I'm up here about it is because I have concerns about the site right now. If there was a topographical map, I can sit there and show you on a topographical map, but I didn't see one at the time. But for starters, right here, in this entrance that I'm circling right here, if you'll notice, this entrance comes into a curve. What this does not show is this curve drops about 40 feet. It's a flat road coming down this way, drops about 40 feet into a sharp curve. There's been 2 fatalities where people have run off the road, ended up down in this area here, down about 50 feet. 2 fatalities there, and there's been multiple motor vehicle accidents that are there, have been there. Most people have lived in the area for a long period of time, have known this. The worst thing about where this road is located, if you're traveling this direction and you're coming up of the hill and it's blind, coming around a curve, and as soon as you get to the top, you have this entrance right here. And all of a sudden, if somebody pulls out, takes a left-hand turn, you're looking at a potential motor vehicle accident right here. That we broached this subject with the folks from Clayton Homes, okay? And before I get started, I want to sit there and tell these guys here, thank you very much, because they took time out of they didn't have to do this, and they took their time to come and speak with us, and we broached the subject with them, and they understand this concern also. And I think they can speak to that if you guys question them about that in a little bit and stuff, but they can speak to it also, but they understand it completely, and they want to be as safe as possible also for the folks within this neighborhood also. To let you know a little bit about my background, I got 34 years. I just recently retired out of being a paramedic in an emergency department trauma nurse. Was a paramedic in Forsyth County and also in Iredell County for a long period of time before I went to Winston-Salem State and became an ED nurse and then a ground transport nurse with Novant Health. My concerns is from the EMS background. I speak these concerns based upon 34 years. I spoke for 3 minutes the other day, but I can go a little bit more in detail about it. The land use development plan for the city of High Point, goal number 4 says that it ensures that all public services and facilities are sequenced to meet the demands of a development. It goes on to say that in the land use development objectives, that you need to maintain an appropriate balance between the size, location, density of a new development and its availability and demands upon the public services and facilities that are going to be required in that development. I consider some of the public services police, fire, and EMS. The site plan for the zoning issue for ZA 22-22 states under the mitigation and impacts whether the applicant's proposed condition zoning district included the proposed uses, written conditions, and conditional zoning plan, in parentheses if applicable, will satisfactorily, and then under mitigation 3, minimize or effectively mitigate any identified adverse impacts upon municipal facilities and services such as streets, potable water, watershed facilities, parks, police, and fire. The zoning submitted has no adverse, the planning board, along with the TRC, said that the zoning said there was no adverse effects upon this. And I tend to disagree because City of High Point's Fire Services has a policy of a 5-minute response time from the time the call is dispatched out to the fire department. They get the call. They have to get on their turnout gear. They have to get into the truck. They have to sit there and locate the location on a map or sit there and punch it into a GPS system on the truck and respond. They have 5 minutes from the time the call is dispatched out to arriving on the scene. Right now, the closest city fire station is Station 14, which I believe is located on Sandy Ridge Road. Am I correct in saying that, guys? I believe. So they can't am I correct? Where you at, Chief? Yeah, it's on Sandy Ridge Road, right? Station 5 is 2.3 miles from there. Okay. I still say they can't potentially get there within a 5-minute time frame, is what I'm saying. They have to have time to get their turnout gear on, and this is within a 24-hour period of time. Okay. The next thing would be that the Guilford County Emergency Medical Services, they have built 2 new ambulance bases in the city of Greensboro, specifically for the population growing in areas such as around near Oak Ridge and areas like that. We're looking at, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor Wagner, but you're looking at, from your planning and development, about 50,000 people coming to around the Colfax, Sandy Ridge Road, High Point area within the next 10 years due to industries and stuff coming in there. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, we don't know for sure, but
That's the numbers I've been hearing. They have not, Guilford County Emergency Medical Services has, since day one when the EMS started, has an ambulance base on Montlou Avenue, 2 blocks from the hospital. The closest ambulance there is off of, Forsyth County EMS has an ambulance off of Highway 66, can get there quicker. I spoke with the folks from Guilford County Emergency Medical Services, and they have told me that they have no intentions or no plans to build another ambulance base or move ambulances within the city limits of High Point. The next closest base that they have will be a quick response vehicle that comes from Station 16 off of West Market Street in Colfax, North Carolina, near the Forsyth-Guilford County line. You're looking at a 20-minute response time for an ambulance coming off of Montlou Road to get out to that area. You're looking at a 15 to 17-minute response time for an ambulance coming near the county line off of West Market Street in Colfax to get to that area. Now, I'm all about, if I present a problem, I'm all about presenting a potential solution. I feel that the elected officials, the city manager here, needs to speak with Jim Albright, the director of Guilford County Emergency Services, and lobby to have an ambulance put at Moses Cone Hospital on Highway 68 and move the quick response vehicle that they have near the county line over to the PTAR ambulance base over at River Landing. It puts it more centrally located in the area to serve the population in that area. And it also sits there and cuts down the response times for an ambulance to get there. Ambulances, the reason why I bring this up is the American Heart Association right now recommends that if you are diagnosed with a heart attack, to get the most positive outcome from the time you're diagnosed from the heart attack, and that includes on the scene of an ambulance call, you've got 90 minutes from the time you're diagnosed with a heart attack to get into the cath lab where somebody like Dr. Tyson sits there and inflates the balloon for the angioplasty. For a stroke, you have 3 hours from the time of the onset of the symptoms of the stroke to get a clot-busting drug to get it on board. If you were having to perform CPR on somebody, you've got a 4-minute window before you start having irreversible damage. And then 10 minutes, no matter what I can do for anybody after 10 minutes of somebody being pulseless and apneic for 10 minutes without any oxygen on board, there's nothing I can do. The chain of survival that the American Heart Association includes first responders and a defibrillator. And the city fire department carries, y'all carry AEDs on every truck, am I correct in saying that? And they do it, I've seen it where city fire saved more lives by getting there and sitting there and shocking somebody with a defibrillator because simply they got there in time. And it's a beautiful thing to sit there and see somebody, after you've shocked them, that they wake up and they're talking to you. If you haven't experienced that, I can tell you that right there is a wonderful thing to watch. So I don't believe that it follows the land use development plan. Tom Kirkman on the Planning and Zoning Board told me that emergency services, road improvements, et cetera, are demand driven, and that the days of a municipality getting out in front of an eventual developments are long over. Okay? He said it's only when the demand actually occurs to a considerable degree that cities and counties respond by building and providing those appropriate resources. And I tend to disagree because there are policies and there are national standards for response times. And there's a policy within the city of High Point that says you got a 5-minute response time. And that's written as a policy. And so I would say that, going forward, this didn't fit the site plan and stuff. And I had concerns about it. So I just want to bring it to y'all's attention. I appreciate your time, Mayor Wagner. Thank you so much. Thank you, folks.
Next person on the list is David Payne.
Mr. Shannon. I'm David Payne, 4419 Deacon Court on one side of this property, 428 Dealworth Road on the other side of the property. Thanks for letting us speak tonight. Thanks, Mr. Shannon, for your information prior to this, and thanks to the fellows from Clayton for meeting with us. I brought some information with me just for reference in a minute. Three up and pass them down. A couple of the issues that we had identified, and we spoke about it. We spoke about it during the planning meeting also, from the original zoning plan that was from, I think, 2008 until the current plan. We do have added to that the stream crossing, correct? That is also a portion of this site plan. In the original planning phase, there was some buffering that I don't know if one of the slides, Mr. Shannon, do you know if the slides will actually show the buffering zones that were in place originally?
The slides do not show that. There are no change in the buffering requirements.
Exactly.
Between 2008 and this current submittal.
Okay. So from the original site plan, there was buffering on one side and then on the road front side, which I think were 20 feet standards. In the area that Tom mentioned earlier, where the current entrance layout is, right beside that property line there, we had asked about buffering down that side. I think there were some plans originally that there could be a possibility of acquiring that property. That's the reason that the stubs were in place to that north side and added there. And since then, that portion of that property is no longer on the market and available and is staying agriculture. On that property at that entrance where Tom had mentioned, there is a 1850s farmhouse. It's documented in the High Point Museum library. It's called the Payne House, and I'm a Payne, so I grew up in this whole area here and on the track on the other side of this property as well. Since the time that they have done the environmental request for the change of the streamline, the impacts there for erosion, since 2008, they have also noted the stream that was, or the runoff and stream that was found there where they've created that extra buffering at the lower corner. There were some notations in the original request of whether or not there was any impact out there whatsoever on anything that had been found for historic or preservation of those type sites. It was shown here in the, and I'm just going by the permitting that we found originally, that none were found and none were noted. But actually, that house is noted as GF 1596 in the reference that they had made. It is noted as GF 1596, noted as the Payne House in the North Carolina State Historic Preservation site. So where this entrance is, as Tom mentioned, puts this back property line within 100 feet of the front of that house that's in that small curve there. So in talking with the developers originally, the original site plan for this layout there had the entrance moved halfway up in their development for the tract homes. It did not impact, I don't think, the amount of tract homes that would go in that property from the original zoning. Is that correct, Mr. Shannon? When the entrance was in the middle of Dilworth there.
That is a completely separate case.
Okay.
So I think there's some confusion. The 2008 zoning just had zoning approval.
Right.
There were a number of plans that were proposed, but none were actually permitted.
Okay.
This is as far along as this proposal has gotten to actually getting a permit, but there have previously been no permitted plans.
Okay.
So there are a whole bunch of different plans floating around, nothing submitted until now and to this point.
Okay. So from my understanding from our discussions with the developers is the original plans, or one set of the plans they had an entrance halfway up Dilworth Road, right in the middle of the tract division, which is one of the things that, after what Tom has researched as far as the potential problems in that curve, we would request that that be reviewed again as part of the conditional plans for the zoning. So that was one thing that we'd like to note is that we would like to see about having that moved. On the original plans, because they had originally had a process of potentially developing the site there where that farmhouse is at, there's no buffering down the back line. And, you know, we would like to see as part of the conditions of the zoning there that there be a heavy buffering zone, just like it is at Dilworth Road, because of potential issues that it would cause with that farm site being so close. That's an open field halfway down that sideline. So everything is open there now, it's not wooded. The whole back of that property in this tract 2 is wooded. So we would like to request, and we've spoke with the developers, and they're not sure because they're trying to maximize the units of houses they can get down that sideline to the north, closest to the farmhouse, if they would be able to do that. That would be the backyards of those houses, so we would have variations of fences, white fences, wooden fences, right across the front from the front porch of that site for that 1850s home. So just as a note, also Benjamin Briggs with the Historic Society, they've been out there, they've documented that house with the Mendenhall Group, as well as some folks from Old Salem. And Benjamin Briggs has, a definite concern about there being an impact that close to that house. So because of, sound, buffering, disturbance, not knowing what the, true site plan is going to end up being there. So that was one thing that we would like to note, and that we'd ask for through the conditional process, that maybe another traffic analysis be done with this curve. It's been a long time. This is 15 years ago when original zoning was put in place for that property there. So we would like to have that looked at. We mentioned the buffer zones. Also, because of this, this creek that has been found later that was added, where they added some buffering zones for this other creek, we had requested during the original meeting a month ago from the planning staff for the impact analysis, the watershed and the environmental impact analysis between when this project started in 2008 or 2009 for the backside of this development and to current. There appears that sometime in 2016, 17, and 18, there were some inconsistencies in the permitting process that we've not, excuse me, we've not been able to find the paper trail on for this creek line. So this creek goes all the way down. There's a natural large pond above the top side of this creek that we see here, and it flows through this property and all the way through my property and then through Mr. Hodgins' property and then through Mr. Lassiter's, which is not here tonight's property. So beyond this lower corner of this Phase 5 area where the stream is, they're talking about crossing, the next 4,000 to 5,000 feet of the stream line we own. That is all in the county. And there were some disruptions in that stream line, which the pictures I've given you were in November, December of 2017. You'll see the pond site there that clearly indicates a pond, and you'll see, the water flow of that river. So sometimes in early 18, through the permitting process that we were able to find, there was permitting put in with the Corps engineers and the watershed and the water quality department to take a look at what they were going to do in the back end of this property as far as placement for a pump station that they needed to use to create sanitary sewer. There is no sewer on the backside and the new track of this property that they're talking about developing. They're going to have to let it flow backwards, cross the stream, create a pump station to go back out to Ski Club Road. There is no sewer beyond that line, and all the fall is going down the creek line, which we own. So we had asked at the time in the last meeting that before this moved forward, that we were able to see some type of paper trail, because we researched all the permitting and the processes from 2008 through current, and the gap that we see in there in 2017 and early 18 is the presence of this pond, which is much larger than what was included in the stream permitting changes that were going to be done in early 18. Looking at the information from the Corps engineers and from the Sue Homewood, which I tried to reach a few different times with Department of Environmental Quality. Originally, when it was put through for the impacts that were received originally back in 2007 for the original request, in 19, she denied it and said that we would have to have the Corps of Engineers involved again. They'd have to be a site visit. But sometime between the end of 2017 and when this permitting went back in place, this pond disappeared. And so, and there was environmental impact down that streamline. Excessive amounts of silt, excessive amounts of erosion, no proper erosion control. And I feel bad for some of the folks that are currently with Clayton, but this was originally a Shugart property, and as they took over sometime at the first or during that process, so they sort of inherited what was going on. So our request was, before anything's done, is that, we can at least see that there is evidence of a proper permitting trail for what's changed already at this point. And so far, we've not been able to find it. It strictly stipulates in the permitting process that it's a living mechanism, so to speak, and that anything that is total temporary or any permanent impact to a stream greater than 150 feet would require that they go back and get a different 401 quality water certification. I have not seen a new water quality certification. It may be in place already, but I've not been able to find it. So I think what we're talking about here on this back track and this phase altogether, whether the conditional use for the 5 is approved or not, is that we do not have, a proper paper trail of that whatsoever. And all of this zoning, from what I understand, is conditioned based on those factors. So I just wanted to go through that with you and see if we could find out, if there's going to be any more impact on that stream, the water quality, and then what other potential problems it's going to cause now with the watershed coming down through that streamline and creating more erosion and erosion problems.
Thank you, Mr. Payne.
Thank you. Appreciate you hearing us.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public hearing. Just so we have a motion to discuss, I will make a motion for approval of this item, and I will adopt the consistency and reasonableness statement as stated by the planning board. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Okay, so now the floor is open for questions or discussion. I believe, I appreciate you coming and telling us your concerns. I think, Chief, would you mind coming up and addressing concerns regarding fire safety and emergency response? Just give us your opinion of whether we'll be able to provide proper service in that area.
Okay, so we actually ran some numbers for Chase Water and Braden, which is kind of right in where the new development meets the old development where the stub ties in at. And so we have our 5 closest fire stations, which is part of ISO grading and accreditation grading. But Station 5 is 2.3 miles, 5 minutes. Station 14 is 3.4 miles, 6 minutes. Station 12 is 3.6 miles, 8 minutes. Station 10 is 3.9 miles, 8 minutes. And Station 4 is 3.9 miles, 8 minutes. So our standards say that we must have the first unit on the scene at 90th percentile within 5 minutes, and full alarm at 8 minutes, which is covering those 5 stations. And so we meet that just like anywhere else in the city. That area up there obviously is continuing to grow, and when Station 4 was moved north, it enhanced that area. The Colfax station that we acquired enhanced that area. So we have no problems whatsoever meeting those standards, and we run this data all the time because everything in the city runs on the same data. We offer the same amount of service to anybody. As far as the medical stuff, that area gets the same kind of service that they get from the county anywhere in the county. They're very limited on the trucks they got, where their trucks run from. As far as like downtown, the trucks don't sit downtown anymore. They partner with fire stations, and they sit in the lot. They used to sit in the stations, but they're not still long enough for that anymore. But I can tell you the way that the EMS service and the medical service has evolved over the time. We're doing more on the fire side for AEDs, pushing drugs, and I can tell you even on the EMS side, if you're going to survive, you're going to survive on that scene from the fire service and from EMS, where they're not going to put you in a back of an ambulance and haul you anymore. But our save rate's phenomenal. We've got top-notch equipment that we use, the AEDs and so forth. Like I said, the drugs that we push as far as for cardiacs, for any number of things, for epinephrine, for anaphylactic shock, and so forth. But our service is basically first class, and by our grade and we get evaluated on this. We just went through it within the last 2 years. Even the areas that we service outside of the city, the Colfax area, the Deep River areas that we provide service to, contract with the county, they get the same rating that everybody in the city gets, because we can prove that we do water hauls. So our standard of service is there. I would not stand right here today and tell you if I can provide the same service there that I provide anywhere else in the city, but we do. We're strategically located. The manager's office, we're actually looking out further for what's coming in the future, because we know as the city grows to be prepared. So we're always looking and vetting our service. So I have no doubt whatsoever that we can provide service to that area.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief? Thank you, Chief. Now, the issue regarding the stream and the stormwater, that's something that's handled at technical review, correct, Mr. Shannon?
That is correct. I believe a lot of the issues that were raised were within Phase 5, the existing developed portion of Meadow Valley. The applicant is still going through that process for the area associated with the zoning site. But as they go through that, they would have to meet all the city and state requirements regarding stream buffers and environmental protection along that stream corridor.
Okay, thank you. So really, as you stated before, the only issue here, I mean, they can build the development as it's currently zoned.
Correct.
Now. It's really just the addition of the 7 homes and the stub street.
That's correct.
Okay.
Herb,
Anyone else have questions?
yes, Herb, the concerns of Mr. Hodgins about the entrance, did that trigger traffic impact analysis, or did any study of that come up during the planning phase?
It did not trigger any new analysis because there was no change, and I believe Mr. Venable could go into more detail on that if you'd like.
Okay, yes.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. Greg Venable, the Transportation Director. We did take a look at this initially, and with the relatively low number of units and the change in that, it didn't require a TIA. As far as the location of that access, we were more than happy to work with the applicant on modifying that location to move it further away from that curve. We also, as part of that process, NCDOT will have to approve that location as well, and so they'll make sure that all safety requirements are met for that access point. But we're more than happy to work with the applicant on that.
Has that been part of the discussion with the residents about adjusting that particular entrance to mitigate those things?
And I had spoken to Mr. Hodgins on the phone and let him know about that as well. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bill. Any other questions for him?
Just to follow up, because it seems like it's been very civil conversation between everybody involved, and this is part of what I've mentioned before is as we grow, it's finding that mesh between some of us old souls and the continued growth and the quality of life balance. And, you know, we zone to the property. We don't zone to the project. So for reassurance, from both sides, y'all got together. Do I understand that Councilman Jones met with some of you as well? Or at least talked to you? Yes. Okay. And outside of the water quality, which will have to undergo its test during the planning and development, what are your consensus on the thoughts of, I know the area, I mean, I grew up in the area, and I kind of agree that the setup of the driveway could use some changing, both safety-wise and aesthetically-wise. And I know that you guys are a for-profit, and I'm all for-profit. But I hope you'll work with the neighbors to see what you can do on the buffering side, whether it be hills or whatever, and see what you can do to address the concerns of the driveway situation, to make the best, community that we can out there. And for staff, I thought Mr. Hodgen made some great points. Is that a conversation that we could take up at his request to at least talk to Guilford County and see what their plans are, where they're at? I mean, certainly trust Chief and his response data, but the man's been in the business 34 years, so I would believe he got some valid points. So if we could follow up on that, just to see what their plan is for the future expansion out in that area.
We can always do that, and we can do that as part of the work that we're doing now, looking at the placement of our stations as we anticipate growth in the city.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right. Okay, there's been a motion and a second for approval of this item. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Is anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Next case is zoning map amendment 22-23. This is from High Point University.
Yes, your next item is zoning map amendment case 22-23. This is a request by High Point University to rezone a 3.7 acre parcel from office to conditional zoning institutional. The site in question is the former Seacrest Funeral Home. High Point University has purchased that property and desires to add that to their campus and use the existing building for academic purposes. The parcel noted in purple to the north, that is the parking lot that was rezoned in 2020 for the arena parking. This zoning proposal, request proposes to add this parcel into that conditional zoning ordinance that was already established for that area. The key items that were looked at for evaluating this request, along with the land use plan, the core city plan, and the university area plan. Key points that came about, the site is surrounded on three sides by institutional use, so this is a logical expansion of the university. The applicants offered conditions to address policies of the core city plan and the university area plan, in which they have proposed to make sure landscaping along University Parkway is meeting the requirements. They've offered conditions to install landscaping along East Lexington Avenue and sidewalks along East Lexington Avenue between North University Parkway and Meadowlawn Avenue. All of the other previous conditions regarding protecting the neighborhood along Homewood Avenue and Meadowlawn Avenue have remained in place as far as screening and limiting access. A key point that I would note, the university area plan speaks to anytime there's expansion to the greatest extent possible, the entire block is being included. With the inclusion of this funeral home site, that is addressing that policy of trying to have rezonings incorporate entire blocks and not pick at the edges of the neighborhood. This request is consistent with policies of the land use plan, the core city plan, and the university area plan. Thus, staff is recommending approval to rezone this parcel from the OI district to the conditional zoning institutional district. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this request at the October public hearing, and they recommended approval, and they forward to you a statement that the request is consistent with adopted policy guidance because the land use plan classifies the zoning site for institutional uses, and as conditioned, the requested conditional zoning institutional district is supported by adopted policy guidance of the university area plan. The commission also stated the request is reasonable in the public interest. The request is surrounded on three sides by the High Point University campus, and it's identified on the university area plan as an area for expansion. That is a brief summary of this request. Are there any questions of staff at this time? Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Shannon? One last chance? Okay. Is there anyone here to speak on this item? Okay. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and I will make a motion for approval of this item, and I will adopt the consistency and reasonableness statement as stated by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is there a second?
Thank you.
There is a second. Any discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. There are a couple of items to be added to the agenda, so I'm going to make a motion to suspend the rules, add two items. One is an item regarding the roster of the One High Point Commission, and the other is an item regarding the hiring of the new city clerk. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules to add those two items. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. First item will be a roster update for the One High Point Commission. And, okay. Staff is requesting that the council approve the recommendation of the One High Point Commission Selection Committee to remove Commissioner Dawn Austin Page and appoint Brenda Dietz to the One High Point Commission and approve the updated One High Point Commission roster. I think, Mr. Hudson, you were in, I mean, I don't know that that needs any more explanation, so
Yes, no,
I will move that we do that. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second to make that change. Is there any discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Next is after a search, our city council has determined that we would like to hire Sandra R. Keeney to be our new city clerk. I believe everyone has had an option, has had the opportunity to look at the proposed contract with Ms. Keeney. I have copies of it here if anyone would like to see a copy prior to the vote. Throw your hand up if you want to see one. Okay. All right. The new clerk intends to begin her appointment on December 5th, 2022. And looking forward to seeing her and having her on staff. And I will make a motion for approval of the employment agreement with Sandra R. Keeney to be the new clerk for the city of High Point. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second for approval of that item. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. We have our general business agenda, and one is some revisions to the ordinance establishing dates and times for our regular High Point meetings for 2023. One is the cancellation of the Monday, January 2nd meeting due to the New Year's holiday and the Monday, January 16th council meeting due to the MLK holiday, but rescheduling that meeting to Tuesday the 17th. Cancellation of the Monday, June 19th council meeting due to the Juneteenth holiday and doing it on Tuesday the 20th. And cancellation of the July 3rd Monday meeting moving due to the July 4th holiday. Also cancellation of the September 4th and October 16th, 2023 meetings due to Labor Day and the furniture market. And I move for approval.
Second.
Was an April date in there too for market?
Doesn't coincide with.
Yeah, it doesn't coincide with market, so I think we're good on April. All right, motion and a second for these changes. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Is there anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Last one is a reappointment to the High Point Housing Authority Board. Chuck Portaro. I move for approval.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second for that item. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes. There's nothing left for this meeting. Once this meeting is adjourned, we still have an open closed session that we're going to return to. So don't run off anywhere. Does anyone have any announcements or anything to make before we adjourn?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would just like to give my gratitude to Mary Brooks for her service in the interim during this process. Thank you so much for your hard work and all that you do. We appreciate you greatly.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep. Anything else?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yep. Happy Thanksgiving. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, there's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Any discussion before we adjourn? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Is anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously, and the regular meeting is adjourned, and we will go back into closed session.